You were listening to A Scary State, and this week we're covering Maine. So, Lauren?
Yes, Nora?
Let's get scary.
Hello.
Hello. So, we're going to start off differently this week. I forgot to tell Lauren I wanted to do this, but please follow us on Instagram at A Scary State Podcast. Usually we say all that at the end, but I'm going to pop it at the beginning this time.
All right, sounds good.
And then follow us on Facebook, A Scary State Podcast.
And send us emails to ascarystatepodcast@gmail.com.
Yes, and also please review us on iTunes. Even if you just give us a 5-star review, it would be amazing.
So, Nora, I wanted to wait till the podcast to tell you this too. So, you can't hate me. So today, I came home from work and I was really hungry and I needed a snack. And I was like, okay, what can I have that's a snack in the fridge?
No.
So I poured some ranch into a bowl and I ate some celery. Nora hates celery and I do not understand it. Please tell me your reasoning.
I just think it's the most vile thing I've ever tasted. I can't stand the smell. I can't stand the texture. The taste. Don't even get me started on the taste. Ugh.
We're part of this Facebook group, and one person posted in it once. It's a foodie group, and she was like, I have so much celery. What should I do with it? Give me recipes. And Nora goes, throw it away.
I'm sorry to whoever I offended for saying that, but I don't regret it and I don't take it back.
Well, don't worry. 50% of this podcast likes celery.
You know what, though?
What?
So it's kind of crazy. Some people actually agree with me. Like, it's not very common to meet people, but sometimes I'll meet who think that, but sometimes I'll meet people and they're like, yeah, I feel the same way. And then other people will be like, what are you talking about? Celery doesn't taste like anything, which that is like...
It does. I will give you, it does taste like
Thank
something.
you.
It has a taste. I like the taste, but it has a taste.
Yeah, that's nice.
You should try it with peanut butter.
I've tried it with everything.
Oh.
It still tastes like shit. Thanks, though.
You're welcome. I was like, I have to tell her, and I'm going to tell her on the podcast, so she can't say anything.
Yes.
So today we are going to talk about Maine. So Maine was nicknamed the Pine Tree State, and it joined the Union on March 15th, 1820, and became the 23rd state in the U.S.
That's 13 days after your birthday.
You know.
Wow.
Oh, thanks. It is unclear how Maine got its name, but one theory is that it comes from the nautical term meaning the main or mainland. Some interesting laws. So I forgot to do the interesting laws.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh my god, I have all these other cool things I found, and I completely forgot to do the interesting laws.
Let's Google it real quick and see what we can come up with on the sly. Okay. In Maine, it's illegal to step out of an airplane once it's in flight. You will be fined if your holiday lights are left up any later than January 14th.
Oh no, Joe and I literally, it's so embarrassing. We left our Christmas tree up until like February last year.
I kind of loved that though.
I love Christmas, and I was like, I'm not ready to take it down yet, so we just didn't take it down.
I was singing Christmas songs like yesterday, and Ian was like, what are you doing? I was like, singing Christmas songs because I love
just
it.
Putting you in the spirit.
In Augusta, it's illegal to walk down the street playing a violin.
Huh. There are a lot of people outside of grocery stores around here who play violins.
Yeah, and you know that almost all of them are not actually playing them.
Oh, I actually didn't know that at all.
It is a huge issue in this area right now.
Wow.
People are, like, they're using a megaphone.
Yeah.
And it's a recording of someone playing it.
Oh.
And they're usually having kids do it.
Yeah.
Because people are more likely to donate.
Because I was always like, oh my god, they are so talented.
Yeah, and they've literally gotten so good that they move their hands like they're playing. So it's almost like they could be really good violinists if they were actually playing.
Wow.
But it's pretty sad.
All right, so now that we got some interesting laws, I can't believe I forgot that.
That's okay.
Well, I think it's because I started to look into Stephen King. So he lives in Maine, gets inspiration for his horror novels from the small towns in Maine. Many of the small towns are very similar to the towns that Stephen King writes about. So there's places that it was like, you can see where it got its ideas from, and the pet cemetery, and it's really cool. Portland, Maine has a Cryptozoology Museum. And during Prohibition, Maine was the first to ban alcohol. So that's not good.
Not fun.
Maine has over 3,166 islands, and it would take you over 9 years to visit all of them. The coldest day was back in January 2009, when temperature dropped down to negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which would be negative 45 degrees Celsius. And there are about 78,000 moose in Maine, which is the highest population of moose in any state.
Wow.
The inn at the Agora is a place where you can sleep in a coffin, but no worries, it sleeps two. You can also spend a few hours in a crypt, the same one that held the body of Thomas Wallace. And Maine has 2 identified serial killers. Yeah. So what story in Maine are you telling us, Nora?
So this week, I'm telling a story of survival.
Okay.
I'm telling a story of a hermit.
Okay.
I'm telling a story that honestly gave me chills to research because I couldn't believe that it was actually a thing that happened recently.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go into it. So in a town called Rome, which is in the southwest part of Maine, something perplexing was happening to the residents over the course of several decades. Items would go missing from cabins, camps, and homes so often that residents were actually able to detect personal preferences of whoever was stealing these items.
Ew.
But there was never a culprit. Items stolen included various foods, such as peanut butter, but never tuna fish. I imagine they never stole celery either, because celery's gross. This person always left behind the tuna fish. Items such as propane tanks and batteries would also go missing very frequently, and they would often steal books too, like thousands of books.
Oh, I'd be so upset.
Me too. Occasionally, an article of clothing would go missing as well, but it was less common. Several police reports also noted the extreme neatness of the burglar's crimes. This was a Houdini-esque burglar who never broke a pane of glass or smashed a door. The person picked locks skillfully, but when they left the cabin, they would make sure to set the latch on the door behind them.
Oh
So
gosh.
it was like a considerate burglar, if that's
Yeah.
such thing. Like, they never left damage, but obviously they were stealing.
Ew, I think I would have changed my locks or done something.
Yeah, I know.
Ooh, like a burglar alarm or something.
Exactly. But still, someone invading the people's personal space, and they were stealing.
Yeah.
So people were really mad. It was so bizarre for this little town of Rome, Maine, but in a weird way, they were almost used to it. Like, they kind of accepted it.
What kind of town is this?
Literally, it's insane.
I'm sorry, I wouldn't accept this.
I
I'd
wouldn't
be like,
either.
Who's
I would-
breaking into my home?
I know. So finally, after 27 years, this mystery person was seen on surveillance footage.
27 years?
27.
That is my age.
I know. That's
Oh
what I'm
my
saying.
God.
It was a white male who looked to be in his 40s or 50s from the footage, and he had curly, graying hair about an inch long, and he was carrying a backpack. This mystery person quickly coined the name the Backpack Burglar, but no one could identify him. In this small town of just over 1,000 residents, not a single person recognized the Backpack Burglar. Then, in the following April, Maine police arrested a man breaking into a freezer in an empty summer camp for the disabled, which is so messed up,
Yeah.
that they had rigged with motion sensors. The man was taken into custody and questioned by police. According to Maine police, this man, who was later identified as Christopher Knight, aged 47, confessed to over 1,000 burglaries over a span of 27 years.
Jeez.
He told police that he had been camping out alone in the woods the entire time.
No.
27 years.
Mm-mm.
So,
Mm-mm.
who is Christopher Knight, this hermit backpack burglar? We're going to get it real deep into that. So Christopher Knight, who I'll refer to as Chris, was born on December 7th, 1965. According to Soapboxy.com, his friends and family remember him as always being a loner. This began when he was young, and Chris just always found people mysterious, and he struggled to relate to anyone on more than a very basic surface level.
Yeah.
He stayed to himself most of the time, and like I said, he was overall just very much a loner. He grew up in a very private family in central Maine. He had 4 older brothers and a younger sister. Now, the Knight children were extremely smart, the type of family rare in this day and age, who were lower middle class with not a lot of money at all, but in the evening they read Shakespeare and poetry together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
They also knew how to fix automobiles and plumbing, and studied thermodynamics as a family.
As a family.
Yes.
Wow.
They built a greenhouse under which they buried hundreds of gallons of water in 1-gallon containers. They knew that water molecules are what's called sticky during the day, which means that they gather heat and at night they release it. This family was really, really smart.
Oh my gosh.
With this knowledge in mind, the family was able to grow food in the greenhouse all winter in Maine without paying a dime to the electric company.
Dang.
So, yeah, they were lower middle class, but they were probably smarter than a lot of upper class people.
Yeah. And if you have the knowledge, use it.
Exactly. So Chris was an outstanding student during his high school years. His grades were so good he was able to graduate early. Once he was out of high school, Chris attended a technical school in Waltham, Massachusetts. Joe, have you heard of Waltham? Yeah. Oh, I said it wrong. Waltham. Cool.
Well, damn.
Chris struggled to make friends. Once he completed the 9-month course, he got a good job installing alarms in homes and vehicles. He took out a car loan with the help of his brother and purchased a Subaru that he considered to be hard-earned. So, his job was installing alarms in homes and vehicles.
Oh.
Yeah, and he became very good at it.
Oh. There's always, BTK, I think it was BTK. He did the same thing.
Really?
Like Dennis Rader. I think he worked for like a company that installed alarms and stuff. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, don't be mad at me. But I'm pretty sure it was him.
The point is, though, it's like it's the perfect storm.
Exactly.
You know?
It's a job that you get into people's houses. You get to see their house. You can kind of canvas it. You have the freaking alarm. Like, you know how it's set. You know how to work it. Ooh, that's so creepy.
Yeah. I mean, and it wasn't just alarms either. It was like motion sensors and like all sort of things to protect your home. He knew the ins and outs of them.
And also motion sensors, where it's going to pick up motion, where it's not going to pick up motion.
Yep.
Oh, gross. Oh, man. Okay.
Yeah. According to soapboxy.com, in 1986, 20-year-old Chris grew increasingly dissatisfied with his job. He quit and decided to take his new car on a road trip south to Florida. When he was driving back home, he drove through Albion, which is his childhood home in Maine. It was a small place located northeast of Augusta. He drove north from there until he almost ran out of gas on a dirt road. Chris then decided to leave his vehicle and go into the woods. He left his keys inside his Subaru and would end up never returning to it.
Ew.
At this time, Chris had no map of the area and no planned destination. He carried a tent, but Chris had never before spent the night in one. Chris just drifted into the woods and the surrounding area. He walked for several weeks, walked south for several weeks. When he was hungry, he would steal food from any gardens he passed. Eventually, he was able to discover a location he considered to be the ideal site. It was in the middle of a dense forest and shielded by boulders. This is so wild. On either side of this location was a pond. Oddly, it was also close to dozens of local summer cabins, but I guess that didn't deter him.
Yeah.
Because he liked
I guess
that
he
little...
thought he was hidden enough.
Yeah,
with the
exactly.
boulders.
And he also didn't realize it at the time, but he was only 30 miles from his parents' home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Also,
it took him 2 weeks to walk that far?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I know. Well, I think it wasn't like a straight path, you know? He's probably like kind of wandering down that way. Mm-hmm. Also, his campsite was located on private property in an area dotted with several hundred cabins and crisscrossed by tiny towns and dirt roads. In other words, he was in the middle of society.
Yeah. That's so weird.
Which makes it so eerie.
Yeah.
Speaking of Chris's parents, they never called the police or filed a missing persons report after he didn't return home from Florida.
And also with his car just being somewhere with the keys still in it, like, why wasn't that something that the police, well, I don't know if you're going to get to it, but why wouldn't it be something the police would investigate?
It was never investigated.
That's so weird.
He literally just dropped it off and...
That's so weird.
I know.
Come on, Maine.
And his family, like, that's just how private and unusual they were.
Yeah.
They kept to themselves, like, to the extreme, which clearly rubbed off on him in a certain way, and didn't want to involve the authorities because that just wasn't them.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it. It's like, it's hard for you or me to understand because we would never do that. But I think that was just their normal. That was just how they worked.
Yeah. I mean, if that's what you grow up with, if that's what you're, it's just what you do.
Winters in Maine could be bitterly cold, like you said in the intro.
Yeah.
And it could reach temperatures as low as negative 25 degrees Fahrenheit, which is negative 31.7 Celsius. But you mentioned the lowest temperature. That would have been when he was out in the woods.
In 2009?
Yes.
Ugh.
It's a miracle he was able to survive.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. So to survive, Chris lived in a tent in the forest, like I said, and he ate food he stole from nearby cabins. He did not have a conversation with another human for nearly 3 decades. He didn't communicate virtually at all either. No emails, texts, nothing.
So he literally, to everyone else, he just fell off the planet.
Literally dropped off the planet.
Jeez.
And he wasn't even that far from society.
Yeah, that's so weird.
Yeah, because he would like walk into town to steal things and then go back to his area.
Did he shower?
So we'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah. He also survived the grueling winters in Maine without even lighting a fire. He didn't light fires because he didn't want to risk drawing attention to himself. So he would wake up every single morning in winter at 2:30 a.m. and rather than huddling in his sleeping bag, he got up and paced the perimeter of his clearing in the woods to stay warm.
I feel like that still wouldn't keep me warm.
I know. It's like you can only move around so much before your limbs freeze off. He did that every night all winter and never lost a toe or so much as a fingernail to frostbite. Chris would melt snow for drinking water. Use a little camp stove with propane, hence all the propane he would steal when he would take his little like shopping trips to town. He also used the propane stove to cook his meals.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, makes sense.
So you're probably wondering, how does Chris carry propane tanks back to his campsite if they weigh around 40 pounds each?
I am wondering that, Nora.
Well, I'll tell you. He would transport the stolen propane cylinders in canoes he took from empty camps and would paddle along the shoreline in the early hours of the morning so that his silhouette would not be seen on open water.
Okay, this man is kind of a genius, though.
He is.
Like these are really innovative ways to do things.
And it's so thoroughly thought out.
Yes.
Upon returning the canoe, he would sprinkle pine needles on them so it appeared that they had not been moved.
Wow.
Yeah. In the summer and fall, he would stockpile supplies. This would make it possible for him to stay in his camp starting in November until March.
Jeez.
I eat so much food, I wouldn't last a week.
Me too.
But so at least when he would go and get the food, he was getting like some touch of society.
Yeah, but it depends, is he really talking to anyone? He's probably not going into a store.
He wasn't talking to anyone.
Exactly.
But for that 5-month period, he was really, really isolated.
Ugh.
But you're right. It's like it doesn't make a difference because it's not like he was talking to anyone when he was in town. But so this way, he would not reveal his location by leaving footprints on the snow-covered ground.
I mean, honestly, so smart.
Yeah, it is. And you're probably wondering, how did Chris bathe? Which you were wondering.
Yes, I was.
Well, I'll tell you that too. He would regularly take cold sponge baths. Okay, so you know how you mentioned that's my whole life, being in the woods?
Uh-huh.
Imagine your whole life never having a warm bath.
No.
27 years. Like, he did not have a warm bath or shower for 27 years.
I would not.
He also would regularly shave and cut his hair in case someone saw him. So
good for him.
It's insane. The guy who arrested Chris was a law and order man to the extreme named Terry Hughes. He said he was prepared to hate Chris, but instead he was amazed at the way this man moved through the forest.
Seriously?
So while bringing Terry and a few others investigate to the campsite, he got to witness the way Chris was just able to flow almost with nature. He described Chris as moving like a cat, silently with agility, grace, and dexterity. When they arrived to the camp, it clearly had been there a long, long time. There were ropes he used to hang items that had actually grown into the trees.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. And I have pictures of all this that I'll post. Oh,
perfect.
Yeah. And books marked from 1990 that he had underneath the tent. Investigators were amazed that Chris's campsite was basically carved out of the middle of the forest. It was hidden by a Stonehenge of boulders with a perfectly flat door. He bound together stacks of the boulders into what he called bricks and buried them under the soil of his campsite to make the floor perfectly flat.
This man.
Insane. He told investigators that he knew the year that he left society was the year that the Chernobyl accident happened, which was 1986.
Oh, wow.
And when he was caught, it was 2013.
Wow.
Yeah. Interestingly, he was up to date on current events, pop culture in particular. He told police he even knew, this cracks me up, he knew who the Kardashians were because he read People magazine to keep current.
So he had been keeping up with the Kardashians.
Exactly. Isn't that so funny? They can't I know, they can't. People who were literally hermits for almost 30 years can't even escape the Kardashians.
Oh my gosh.
So now I, along with many others, felt super empathetic towards this hermit, Chris Knight, as well. But through my research and looking at different sides of the situation, I kind of shifted my view a little.
Okay.
Especially because of one man who was interviewed, and he was a victim of the burglaries. And he asked that people who feel empathetic towards Chris consider the decades of dealing with Chris treating his home as if it were his own personal pantry.
Okay.
One of the summer cottage owners Chris repeatedly burgled, that's literally a word, burgled.
Yeah.
said, "He stole every bit of my piece of heaven."
Oh.
I know. According to police, everything Chris owned besides the glasses on his face were stolen.
So he had the same pair of glasses?
That's what I'm saying. I literally wrote this whole thing. I was like, I'm not an ophthalmologist, but I'm pretty sure your prescription changes every few years. And like, how did you not break the glass on your glasses? It's just insane. That
or like a smudge or a scratch or something.
Exactly.
That would be so freaking annoying.
I know. And you know he's having headaches because his prescription's not the same. I'm just saying. After Chris was caught, Rome, Maine held a day of residents to meet and collect their items, which had been stolen by Chris over the 27-year period.
I would forget half of the stuff that I had like 27 years ago.
Same. I would be like, oh, I literally didn't even know I had that. Like, what?
Like, you know when things go missing and you like forget about it until you find it years later? You're like, that's where that went.
So one man found his cooler, which was missing, and it had his name written on it still. The same man said, yes, Chris should spend time in jail. He wasn't just a hermit. He was a thief.
I mean, yeah, but you did make me feel empathetic towards him when you told me about his like super quiet,
I know,
no social life
thing. It was such a emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, seriously.
Part of me is like, I understand it, but part of me is like, okay, but he did it off the backs of others.
Yeah.
A journalist named Michael Finkel, who has written for National Geographic, which is where I got a lot of my info for this story, actually wrote a book about Chris called The Stranger in the Woods, The Extraordinary Story of the Last True Hermit. The book answers questions like what makes a person abandon the world and become a hermit? Mm-hmm. And does he have something important to teach us? I don't know. So basically, he also answers in this book that there's 3 different reasons that people disappear from society and become hermits.
Okay.
The first is because they're protesting something.
Okay.
Protesters are angry about what the world has become, and they have been recorded from ancient China to the present day. They protest war, consumerism, and poverty by leaving the world.
Okay.
Chris Knight, though, said that he had no opinion of the world. It had nothing to do with that. So then we move on to the second reason, which is pilgrimage. The most common reason why people leave is for religious purposes or pilgrimage. That includes Jesus, Muhammad, and Buddha. Today, about 3 billion people follow the religions brought back by those people.
Dang.
Chris Knight said he wasn't religious. He had read the Bible as a child and didn't need to see it again. So he wasn't on a journey for pilgrimage for religious purposes.
And usually the pilgrimages aren't like 30 years.
Exactly.
27 years. They're like, what? I don't know, like, because the Mecca, that's the one I'm thinking of, the pilgrimage to Mecca. I think that's like a couple weeks at most or something.
It's like weeks or months, not,
not
years. Exactly. So the final reason is because of pursuing something. So pursuers are the most popular kinds of hermits these days, like current day. People who leave the world for artistic, scientific, and personal reasons, like Henry David Thoreau, who said he went to the woods to explore the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans of his inner world.
That's an interesting little thing there.
So, but Chris doesn't fit this category either. He never wrote down his sentence or snapped a photo. His solitude, though he was a thief, was super rigid and locked away. And plus, Thoreau only spent 2 years in his cabin on a pond, and his mother did his laundry there. So Chris was he really disliked Thoreau.
So you said he didn't really steal clothes. Did he just wear the same clothes?
I think he did steal clothes, but it was so few and far between that it wasn't as noticeable. So I think he literally only stole things that he absolutely needed.
Dang.
Yeah. So we have a man who lived alone in the woods for nearly 3 decades, confessed to 1,000 break-ins, but had never carried a weapon or harmed anyone. So legally, what happened next to Chris? Well, he was sentenced to 7 months in jail on October 28th, 2013, and he had already served all but a week while awaiting sentencing. In addition to the jail sentence, Knight paid $2,000 in restitution to victims, which doesn't even begin to cover it, but he doesn't have any money.
Not at all.
And then he also completed a co-occurring disorders court program, which is designed for people with some substance abuse problems and mental health disorders.
Did he have substance abuse, or did they think it was more just like mental health?
I think, if anything, mental health, but more of like an extreme personality trait.
Yeah. Huh.
So I don't know how helpful that was, but they probably were like, well, we have to do something so that there's not an outrage, so we'll just put him in these programs,
Probably.
you know?
Mm-hmm. Checking the boxes.
Exactly. So then he completed 3 years of probation.
Where was he during probation?
Who knows?
In the woods.
Probably. So Chris has described deep-felt ethical misgivings about the burglaries committed, saying that stealing is wrong. Even the prosecutor said that a longer sentence would have been cruel.
Oh.
I know. I don't
feel
know
how to feel.
I know. Judge Nancy Mills believes that Chris was unlikely to reoffend. After release, Chris met with the judge every week, avoided alcohol, and secured a job with his brother. Journalist Michael Finkel, who I mentioned earlier and who wrote the book about Chris, met with him for 9 one-hour sessions while he was in jail.
Okay.
Chris was largely reluctant to express any inkling of motives or insights gained through his experience, but he did offer, quote, "Solitude bestows an increase in something valuable, my perception. But when I applied my increased perception to myself, I lost my identity. There was no audience, no one to perform for. To put it romantically, I was completely free." So that's the story of the Hermit.
Dang.
Yeah, it kept referring to him as the last hermit, but I'm like, we don't know that.
Yeah, there could be someone who pops up in 27 more years.
Exactly.
Dang.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's so crazy.
Oh, and that was an emotional, like, I don't know how to feel. Like,
I know.
I feel bad for him and I want him to be happy, but then also at the same time, I'm like, you stole, which was really bad.
I know. It was almost like out of desperation, though, to escape society.
And did he ever say why he wanted to leave?
He just wanted to be alone. He said it was like a sense of freedom.
I guess. It reminded me a lot of this show I watched. It's called Alone. It's on TV. I've seen it on, I think Netflix or something. Mm-hmm. But literally it's, I think 12, 10, something like that. People go out into some environment and they literally just try to survive. Yeah. And that's the whole point of the show. And whoever survives the longest wins however much money. Mm-hmm. But you don't know who else is still in. So you could be going and only one other person's in for 30 plus days. Wow. It's crazy. You have to make your own food or get your own food, make your shelter, all this stuff. It's crazy. And then they'll have the judges come and check on your health every now and then to make sure your organs aren't shutting down because you're not eating enough.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then you have one call, one phone, and that phone is your one call to be all right, I'm out of the competition.
Wow.
It's crazy. My brother and I got really into it and we finished a whole season in 2 days.
I want to watch that now.
It's actually really
that sounds really good.
And Ian would probably like it. Okay. I would watch the Arctic one.
Okay.
That's the first one Jared and I watched.
So it's in the cold?
Yes.
Oh, gosh.
One guy, I'm not going to tell you who, but his shelter burnt down, because they had a fire inside and it burnt down. And so he called the medical people and he was like, hey, I'm out. I don't have shelter. And they're like, we can't get to you until the morning because of how bad it was, the night and where he was. And they're like, you have to survive until the morning. So thankfully his stuff was on fire, so he was able to stay really close to it and not freeze in the middle of the night. But he had no shelter. And he was like, I can't rebuild this. I'm out.
It's called Alone?
Alone.
Wow, I need to watch that.
It's so good.
Reading this case reminded me of, have you ever seen the movie Castaway?
Yes.
I wonder if he had something to keep him company, because no matter how much
Wilson.
Yeah, it's an innate human need to
have to have companionship.
Yeah, so I'm did he have a Wilson or something where he would talk to whatever it was? I couldn't find anything. So that's really interesting though.
Well, that was a really good one.
Thanks.
So, for my case this week, I found something that involves something we haven't talked about before. So I'm going to talk about the Allagash Abductions, also known as the Allagash Waterway Abduction. So in August of 1976, 4 friends, all in their early 20s, decided to go camping for 2 weeks in the Allagash Wilderness. Allagash is located in Maine, surprise, surprise, and is in Aroostook County, which is in northern Maine. So I looked up how to say that, Aroostook County, and I got 3 different ways to pronounce it on YouTube, and I don't know what's right, so I just went with my way.
Okay, cool.
So Allagash is a very small town with a population of only 239 based on the 2010 census. So Allagash is a popular place to hunt, camp, and hike as the wilderness covers thousands of acres. So these 4 men, twin brothers Jack and Jim Weiner, Chuck Rack.
Wiener?
I don't know how it's pronounced, if it's a wiener or Weiner. Chuck Rack and Charlie.
Did you look up that one at work?
There's some things I learned to not look up. And Charlie Foltz. So they were all art students from the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. So both of our people were in Massachusetts at some point.
Yeah.
And they decided to take a 2-week trip to the Allagash Wilderness to fish in the backwoods. They set out for their trip in August of 1976. The 4 men had all met in high school, but another source that I found said that Jim, Jack, and Charlie were friends and that Chuck was their guide, as the wilderness can be challenging and hard to navigate. So all 4 men left from Boston, Massachusetts, and met up at their staging location. From there, they hired a pontoon airplane and flew from there to Telos Lake to begin their camping trip. The first day of their trip went fine and went by without incident. They fished and camped and enjoyed nature. The second night is when things started to get a little weird. Jim noticed, off in the distance, a strange bright light. He at first thought it was just a helicopter or a weather balloon, but noticed that it was displaying a strange glow. He said that it was just floating above the treetops, not really moving, for about 30 seconds before it disappeared. Jim said that, after seeing this, he was left with a really odd feeling, like something wasn't quite right, but he didn't dwell on it and continued on with his night. Nothing else happened, and the night again went by without further incident. The next day also went by fine, but they were unlucky with their fishing. No one had caught anything, so they decided that they should try their fishing at night instead, which is never a good idea. So on August 20th, the 4 men set up their camp on the shores of Eagle Lake or Smith Lake, based on which source you're reading. As it started to get dark, the men made a bonfire on the shore. This fire was to act as a beacon back to their campsite and help them find it when they were done night fishing. They had used big logs to make the fire and knew that it would burn for about 2 to 3 hours. They hopped in their canoe and headed out onto the water. They started fishing and all was going well until Chuck noticed the same bright light that was seen 2 nights before, because Jim had told them about the light. It was about 300 feet above the tree line off in the distance. The men noticed that it was much larger than the one that Jim had described the other night and emitted no sound. It was completely silent. The light then started to change colors in front of the men's eyes. Red, green, then whitish yellow. Chuck said that while looking at this very bright light, he had a weird feeling that someone was staring at him. Charlie, who was a Navy veteran, grabbed a flashlight and began flashing an SOS. Literally no idea why you would flash an SOS at a random thing in the sky.
I know.
But I guess you do you, Chuck. Or Charlie. But that's when the light moved and sped towards the men. Up close, this craft looked to be about 80 feet in diameter, or a little over 24 meters. Suddenly, out of the bottom of the craft, a bright blue light shot out and began making its way towards the men. All of the men, except for Chuck, turned and began frantically paddling back towards the shore. Chuck seemed to have become entranced as the craft was approaching. Another source said it was Charlie who was fixated on the craft, quote, wanting to meet the aliens. So Jim recalls the thoughts that he had while he was rowing away. He said that this thing was right behind them and was gaining on them pretty quickly. He kept thinking that there was literally no way they would be able to outrun this thing. He remembers thinking that he could pick up a stone and hit its side. That's how close this craft was.
Oh, no.
Very quickly, the light enveloped the 4 men and their canoe.
What?
The next thing they knew, the men were standing back on the shore next to their campsite. All they were able to do was stare at the craft that was hovering only a few dozen feet away from them. Suddenly, it imploded as it had done 2 nights before and disappeared. It immediately reappeared on the other side of the lake, just over the treetops, where it then sped upwards and disappeared into the sky, becoming just another star. Something that the men did note as weird, though, was that this huge bonfire that they had made before they left was nothing more than a pile of ashes. They weren't gone long enough, and the fire was huge, so it still should have been going.
Yeah.
The men figure that hours must have passed for the fire to have burned out, that the men all agree that there was no way they were on the water for more than an hour and a half at most.
Wow.
So this fire should have still been roaring.
Yeah.
Somehow, after this whole experience, the men were able to go to sleep. They said it was just extreme fatigue and exhaustion, and they just fell asleep. And they didn't talk about this event or anything, just went to bed.
If it was us, we would have been like up all night.
We would have been up like, all right, what do you think this is? We got to tell this tomorrow.
How do we get out of here?
So the next morning, the men still didn't talk about what had happened the night before and simply packed up their stuff, ready to move to a new campsite.
Okay, then.
Yep. On the way out of that campsite, they asked a park ranger about the mysterious lights they saw the night before. The ranger just said that they were spotlights from the opening of a new hardware store. I don't think I believe that.
Yeah.
The men spent 6 more days out in the wilderness camping and never saw the weird light again. They continued on with the rest of their camping trip and returned back to their normal lives. So,
wow.
This seemed to be the end of the whole ordeal for 12 years. 12 years, the men lived normal lives, but soon all of that changed. Jim had an accident where he ended up falling 15 feet. I wasn't able to find how he fell, where he fell, but he fell 15 feet. From this, he ended up getting temporolimbic epilepsy. This is the most common form of epilepsy, so when you think about it, this is like the form you're thinking of. He met with many doctors after his fall, and during his treatment, he began to experience horrible nightmares. His nightmares were of monsters surrounding his body and doing different experiments on him. In his dream, he saw creatures with long necks and large heads. Their hands were insect-like, with only 4 fingers, and they had lidless eyes that were large, metallic, and glowing. These creatures were examining his arms. He also saw Jack, Charlie, and Chuck sitting on a bench nearby, unable to move to come help him.
He's lucid dreaming?
This is just dreams he's having. Oh, wow, I don't know. These are just dreams he's having.
Crazy.
Soon enough, the other 3 men began having similar dreams. One source said that these dreams began during their camping trip 12 years before, but most sources said it didn't start for 12 years, so that's the one I went with. These nightmares were keeping Jim up at night, and his doctors noticed that he was overly tired. The doctor kept trying to figure out what was happening to cause Jim to be so tired, but he kept refusing to say anything. The doctor told Jim that he needed to know, as his lack of sleep was affecting his medical treatment. That's what prompted Jim to finally open up to his doctor. He told his doctor that he had been experiencing waking up at night to see strange creatures levitating in bed and temporary paralysis while things were being done to him. So it kind of sounds a little bit like lucid dreaming or sleep paralysis.
But the fact that all his friends were having the same dream, like, cancels that out.
Yeah.
And also, did I hear you correctly earlier that they all of a sudden appeared back at their campsite after that thing hovering? So there's no way it could have been lights, like, from the hardware store or whatever.
So he then told his doctor about his experience in Allagash. This physician was familiar with the abduction phenomenon and told him that he should talk to a UFO researcher. So the abduction phenomenon is mainly the phenomenon of people getting abducted by aliens, and it's apparently a really common thing that happens, and many people end up having very similar stories and experiences. So it's like this legit, commonly known thing. So many years later, in May of 1988, Raymond Fowler, an American author, UFO researcher, and member of the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, was hosting a UFO conference. Out of curiosity and informed by his doctor, Jim attended the conference. After the conference, Jim met Fowler and told him about the strange experience and encounter he had 12 years prior. Fowler was obviously very interested and excited about Jim's story. He was primarily interested in the fact that Jim had not been alone, but instead had 3 other people with him who had experienced the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Fowler then suggested that Jim and the other 3 men undergo regressive hypnosis. So regressive hypnosis is a way to use one's imagination to go back in time and re-experience past events. So it's a way to recall facts from that event that may have been forgotten or repressed over time. So you kind of relive it to see everything that's going on. Jim was then put in touch with high school English teacher and hypnotist Anthony Constantino. Apparently, Constantino had used hypnosis to help Fowler remember details of his own abduction that had occurred years prior in Danvers, Massachusetts.
A lot of Massachusetts.
I know. It's not even our Massachusetts episode. So the men were all hypnotized separately in 3-hour-long sessions. So 3 hours per session. Each man ended up telling relatively the same story. So they all remembered being abducted by what they now know as a spaceship, and then subjected to many different physical examinations, many of which the men described as being humiliating, in a room that Chuck described as looking like a vet's office and included a silver table.
I picture all white, very sterile.
I do too. Jim recalled the aliens had terrifying faces. The men said that these creatures were able to communicate with them telepathically and told them not to be afraid and to just do what they say. The men explained that the aliens seemed to be using some kind of mind control while they were on the ship, forcing them to do the things they did and the willingness they had. One of the men described the experience as being, quote, probed and tested by 4-fingered beings with almond-shaped eyes and languid limbs, end quote. It should be pointed out, though, at this point, that apparently the aliens that the men described matched those that were described in the book Communion, written by Whitley Strieber in February of 1987, so a year before the men were interviewed.
Wow.
Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So Charlie recalled that during his examination, the aliens had put a panel over his chest, then proceeded to scrape his skin to get samples. He also recalled the experiments being so painful that he had screamed out in agony. Chuck was able to say that he got a good view of the aliens and what they were doing to Charlie, who looked like he was in extreme pain. He described they were using a silver device that had a curve to it. So they're all telling these stories from their own perspective, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
One of the Wiener brothers had said that during the exams, he had a strong feeling of hatred towards these creatures. He said that if one got near him, he was going to throttle it. So overall, this is kind of the story that we were able to put together.
Wait, did they have marks on their body after this?
I'll get to it.
Oh.
So once they entered the spaceship, they were forced to take off their clothes and sit on a plastic-like bench. The room they were in was misty and the light was being diffused by a white light. The creatures on board began looking in the men's eyes and mouths with a pencil-sized rod that had a light on the tip. The men were then placed in harnesses and were made to flex their arms and legs. Then, one by one, they were told to lie down on a table, and each were examined by different handheld machines and larger machines that were lowered over their bodies. During the examinations, samples of saliva, skin scrapings, blood, feces, urine, and sperm were all taken from each of the men.
Oh my gosh.
Once the exams were over, each man was able to get dressed. They then entered another room that had a round portal on one of the walls. Then one by one, they walked through the portal. Each man reported feeling a strange sensation going through their bodies as they floated down a hollow beam of light into their canoe, which was just floating in a shallow section of the water. The canoe was steady as each man was placed into it in the same positions they were in before. So while under hypnosis, it was revealed that the Weiner twins, Jack and Jim, had been experiencing nighttime visitations by these alien creatures and had other alien abduction experiences ever since their childhood. It was also revealed that they had been abducted a few times during their adult years as well. So one experience that occurred during their childhood years happened to Jim. He said that while he was a kid, there had been a big snowstorm. Somehow, he fell into a deep hole and was lost for 5 hours. While he was in the hole, he said that 2 creatures with cloaked faces were looking down at him. Mr. Roy Boy.
Lauren's dog is playing.
We got him a new toy today, and he really loves it.
Is it the frog?
No, it's like a duck.
Oh, okay. It looks similar to
Does Ellie have the frog?
She has the frog, yeah.
So he said these cloaked creatures were looking down at him. When he was found 5 hours later, his clothes were perfectly dry, which wouldn't have been possible in this kind of wet storm that he was in. Later, he said that those creatures he saw during his childhood reminded him of the Allagash aliens. One experience that occurred during their adult years happened to Jack and his wife Mary while they were in Townsend, Vermont at their remote mountain home. This incident occurred on May 20th, 1988. So his dog had woken up in the middle of the night and wanted to go out to the bathroom. So Jack got up and let his dog out. That's when he said that he noticed a blue light shining through his kitchen window. He walked out and saw the light hovering in a field near his house. He brought his dog back inside and went to bed. The next morning, he obviously thought this whole experience was just a dream. Jack had another hypnosis session when he revealed what had actually happened that night. So after he brought his dog inside, he went back to bed, not wanting to deal with something like this again. He then remembers covering his head with his covers, but knowing that someone or something was in his house. Next thing he knows, the covers are removed and the alien is right there next to his head.
Oh, jeez.
There's another one on Mary's side of the bed leaning over her as well. But Jack said he wasn't able to do anything. He was pretty much being forced to do what the aliens wanted him to do. Then the two, Jack and his wife, were being moved towards the bright light. He and his wife were brought up into the ship and were separated. That's when Jack underwent more experiments and examinations similar to what happened to him 12 years ago. After that, the two were reunited and moved back to their beds. Mary did not respond to the hypnosis, but did recall having a weird dream that night of a deer with big eyes coming to her bedside.
I'm guessing it wasn't Rudolph.
Jack also had physical marks from his abduction. He had burns on the bottom of his feet and a biopsy-like scoop mark that showed up above his ankle. So this scoop mark is actually a common sign that many report having after they claim to have been abducted by aliens. Jack also ended up developing a large lump on his leg just mysteriously overnight one night, which he later was able to get removed. But the pathologist who removed it was unable to identify what it was, so it was sent to the Center of Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia. Jack went to check up with the CDC on the lump and was told that it was now in the possession of the Department of Defense with military pathologists in Washington, D.C. While there, it was analyzed by a United States Air Force colonel. The DoD had come to the CDC and confiscated the sample for some reason. I could find nothing more on this lump.
Wow.
It just disappeared. After the hypnosis, the men received psychiatric exams and all were cleared as mentally stable. They also all passed lie detector tests when questioned about their experience, meaning that they all truly believed this is what happened to them.
Wow.
Also after this hypnosis, Constantino, the man who had conducted the sessions, had said, quote, "It was the most intense experience I've ever had as a hypnotist. After working with these guys, I was scared. I still am. I think it's true. I think they were being tagged, the way we tag and study sharks and bears and then release them." End quote.
No, I didn't even think of it like that.
How creepy. So he said that he truly believes that the men are telling the truth about their experiences. The men's stories were also examined and compared to other reports that had been gathered of other alien abduction stories. These other reports came from a very exhaustive study done by Dr. Thomas E. Bullard of the University of Indiana of 270 reported UFO abductions that had occurred in the U.S. It was found that the 4 men had experienced all of the atypical benchmark signs of a UFO abduction phenomenon. So remember how I said these men were all art students? Well, they were able to draw detailed sketches of what the creatures, their craft, and the instruments used in the experiments looked like. So you'll have to post one of the pictures because it's kind of creepy. Chuck was having difficulties with trying to draw these creatures, though. He said that whenever he tried to think of them, he couldn't put an exact image to them. He compared it to trying to tune in to a fuzzy radio station. Jack had different issues with his art. His art began to take on a strange look. He became fascinated with burning holes into pieces of graph paper as art. Some of their drawings can be found online. The main one shows 2 men who appear to be naked sitting on a bench.
The main one?
Like,
I know, I get it.
Took me a second. So the main one shows two men who appear to be naked sitting on a bench. Another man is on the table with a block-looking apparatus on his chest. Also in this room, there are 3 aliens wearing full jumpsuit types of outfits. They also have elongated heads and big black eyes.
Wow.
So some ufologists believe that in the 1980s, there was an alien hybridizing program going on that got out of control. So like aliens, like I guess, I don't even know. During this time, there was a wave of abduction reports all across Maine that seemed to all include the same things: an invasive and embarrassing medical exam, amnesia of the event, and suppressed anxiety that produced psychological issues. Over time, these 4 men became local celebrities of a sort. Books were written about what they had experienced, one being the Allagash Abductions, written by Robert E. Fowler, the man who Jim had met and talked to at the UFO conference. Fowler, who I mentioned was part of MUFON, was prompted by this event to include the Allagash Abduction in MUFON's Great Significance category. Full-length comic books were drawn that included the men. They appeared on many different talk shows, including The Joan Rivers Show. They attended UFO conventions as the Men of Honor, and their story appeared on the show Unsolved Mysteries, Season 6, Episode 32.
Wow.
But of course, there are many who believe that the men are lying and that their whole tale is fake. Dr. William Cole, who I wasn't able to find anything specifically about because that is a very common name, said that he believed that the men's recalling of the experiences and nightmares came from watching movies and TV shows about aliens. Another argument is that Jim, who was already interested in UFOs and knew his fair share of information about them, had fabricated some of this. He was also
got all his friends too, though?
I don't know.
Like...
He was also interested in the work that John Mack had done. So John Mack was known for his psychological study of 200 people who had reported recurrent alien encounter experiences. Jim had also brought up the possibility of an alien abduction to his doctor. This realization about having been abducted only came about after his blow to the head. So many people think that this is just like, oh, what a coincidence.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, I feel like it could be true. Like, you get hit on the head, it kind of it could re-jog your memory, or just you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I feel like that's not something that should be looked into. Another reason people don't fully believe this tale is because all of the information was received through hypnosis, which isn't a certified medical practice, and there are no experts, so it can easily be messed up and isn't reliable. It can't be held up in court either. Yeah. So people don't really have much faith in it. People also believe they had a lot to gain by doing this. The men received celebrity status within the UFO community, received some profit, an increase in their artwork, but I personally don't think anyone would make up a story like this for financial gain, especially one that could call into your sanity, call into question one's sanity. And especially a story that people could so easily critique. Yeah. In 2016, Chuck Rack was interviewed by St. John Valley Times and admitted that the abduction part of their story had been made up. He did say, though, that the group did see strange lights over a couple days during their camping trip, but that was it. He said he just went along with everything for financial gain.
I was going to say, I feel like it is financially.
Chuck, Charlie, and Jim, though, all stand by the incident and the fact that they were abducted. Jim is quoted saying, quote, "We also accept the results of the hypnotic regression sessions and subsequent polygraph tests as supportive of an abduction scenario," end quote. Jim said that he believes Chuck is saying these things about it being fake and whatnot because he had a falling out with the other men. Jim said that Chuck was the only one trying to profit off of this experience. None of the other men were. And because of that, they all steered clear of Chuck.
Imagine them fighting. Wait, real quick. He's like, I'm going to tell everyone that the alien story was fake. And they're like, don't do that. And then he just imagine that fight.
I want to see the scene you're playing in your head.
I just picture them having a bitch fit with each other and just throwing out the craziest threats.
I mean, probably. Jim described Chuck as being a loose cannon and an angry and resentful person. So overall, we have many people who don't believe these men and side with Chuck, saying that it was all fake and the men were in it for the money. Then we have the other half who sides with the other 3, saying that all the events were true and that this was their real experience. So the events that happened in Allagash are still, to this day, a mystery.
Wow. That's wild.
Yup. So I was looking up weird things that happened in Maine, and I saw an abduction. I was like, oh my God, people got abducted by some crazy person. I was like, let me read this. And then it was about aliens, and I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. We haven't covered aliens yet.
Oh, that's so good.
So that is the Allagash Abductions.
Nice. My story fell under urban legends, but it was it's all true.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's a fun urban legend. Yeah. Maybe not fun, but a really cool urban legend.
But that's true, though. Yeah. Which is weird. I was like, okay.
Just think, though, for those 27 years, it probably was an urban legend.
Yeah.
There's a man, he
coming
lives in
into
the
houses.
Yeah.
No one's safe.
Oh, that's so weird.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much for listening. We gave you all of our socials at the beginning, so we won't do it again here. So,
Thanks for listening.
Yes.
We really appreciate it.
Stay scary.
Stay safe. Hey everyone, have you ever had the idea to start your own podcast but had no idea where to start? We had no idea either until we found Buzzsprout.
It is hands down the easiest and best way to launch, promote, and track your podcast. Buzzsprout has made our experience with podcasting both fun and stress-free by listing our show on all major podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, just to name a few.
You'll get a great-looking podcast website, audio players that you can drop into other websites, detailed analytics to see how and where people are listening, tools to promote your episodes, and much more.
Following the link in the show notes lets Buzzsprout know we sent you, gets you a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for a paid plan, and helps support our show.
Join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout.
And remember to stay scary.
Stay safe.